Hi, it's the Mike Gormley show. My friend Frank Gallagher is on with us. One of the best sound men you can find in the music world, and has years of experience and some of the greatest artists ever. We coming in, we heard the Saints, but we were going out a little while ago. We heard Heaven by Talking Heads, and we were just chatting about them, talking, you might say. And uh, how did you started to say how that came about? You kind of they were stuck and you helped them out. Is that
Well,
correct?
no, they were on a tour and the budget they were on, the Ramones had a full crew. They had a sound guy, lighting, they had a stage guy, and Talking Heads had no one. So me and my assistant who trucked the gear around, we had backline and no, we didn't carry lights, backline and a PA in a 3-ton truck, and uh, so Talking Head showed up and we didn't know what was going on, and they said we don't have anyone, so you're mixing it. So.
You'd never
And
met
that's
them before.
I'd never heard them before, never met them, never heard a lick of their music. They had nothing out in England at that time except an import. And Seymour Stein sent them over uh, and funded that little part of the trip.
Yeah,
And I remember they were on $5 a day per diem in
really,
1970.
$5 a day.
$5 a day per diem. That's what Sire gave them. I'm not going to say too much about that.
No, no. Well, even in those days, when costs were lower, that's pretty low. That's for lunch
Aye.
and dinner.
But they did a lot of press and they got a, you know,
Yeah, it worked for them.
that worked for them. The Saints were also on one of those shows. We did 2 nights at the Roundhouse in London, Ramones, Talking Heads, and the third act was the Saints from Australia, and I ended up mixing them. Uh,
That was a very big group in Australia.
yeah, yeah. And then I did between me moving to America. I, I I went back and forth a couple of times, and I'd mix the Saints on a few tours.
Yeah, I saw them in Australia once, and the lead singer had broken his leg or something, so he was singing from a wheelchair.
Yeah,
Kind
yeah,
of, kind of squashed his presentation a little bit, but the music was still great. You know?
yeah. Good band, good band.
Yeah. Um, what about venue to venue? Is it you have to call ahead, make sure everything's the way you want it to be, and then you get there and it may not be, and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, that happens a lot. That
Yeah.
happens. Well, we used to do it before faxes even, but we would at least carry our own PA. But you would never know what the power was going to be like. We did a field in Hungary, and it was like they ran the power so far, but the time it got to us in the middle of the field, there was nothing left. It was and no grounds and language problems. And back then there wasn't a European color code either for the power,
Uh,
you know. So you would have to tell, and guys wouldn't know what your color code was coming from England, you know.
the color
Uh,
code, explain that a little bit just for
well,
fun.
the color code is if there's, depending on how many cables, at least three. There's a live, a neutral, and a ground. Live, neutral, ground, and they
Mhm.
were color coded. And in England, when it first started, it was red, black, and green, and then the European it came in for people who were colorblind. It was brown and some. Anyway, just
But
things you had to think about.
some places it'll be all black.
Oh no, some places you wouldn't ask. You just tell the guy, hook it up. I'm walking away. I'm walking away from you. But yeah, venue to venue, you know, people say, well, what's your favorite building? I say, well, I'm not an architect, you know. Audio, well, these days it's much easier, but back then we had boxes that only pointed one way with a little bit of spread. Now
Yeah.
these line arrays that are hanging at 120 degrees wide, they cover the room. We would have ground stacked speakers. Hammersmith Odeon was one example where there were big holes in the middle of the place because of we just couldn't get enough sound in there to fill the room properly, ground stacked and
There was
understacked.
actually places in the audience where they weren't hearing much.
Oh yeah, yeah. There'd be face holes, there'd be bass traps, it was weird. The Beacon Theatre could be like that too, but I've mastered that one.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time there.
Oh, aye. I spent I spent a lot of time popping in and out of the Beacon
Yeah,
over over the years.
it's sort of sound, generally speaking. I know that the technical side of it is better. The way you work it is better, and I know you can make it sound great because I've heard your words. But um, does it travel one you have to start all over again when you get to a building, or is it you think nowadays it's a little more cohesive?
Oh, it's a lot more cohesive these days because most buildings have at least a house system and it's tuned to the room and the standard is pretty good. You know,
Uh,
I was just looking at a small club in Decatur, Georgia today, and the 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 sound system is beautiful. Is top end brand names. You know, I
mhm.
can tell by the brand names,
Yeah,
the boxes, what they've got in there, and that's a very small place. And you'd think, wow, but no, it's and then digital consoles too. We can carry our show on a thumb drive and just show up and you know,
yeah.
I'll be doing a show in New Jersey with the B-52s. I know what console I'm going to get. Uh, and I take, or I even send them the file and they load it for me. So I show up at the venue and my file is loaded on the console.
Hmm. Be ready to go.
Yeah, and then you just tweak it for the building. Every building's different. But here's the thing. Um, B-52's played Paris. Lenny Kravitz came back afterwards and he said, man, that sounded great. You have really good ears. I said, I don't mix with my ears. I mix with this.
Yeah.
And he said, good answer. And then I told him, I said, when you can afford me, you call me.
Oh, no, no,
Lenny,
I think he can afford you by now.
I was winding him up. I was
Yeah, I
winding him up.
understand. I understand. Uh, so do you ever get maybe the older days of rock and roll and backstage and Party Central and all that sort of stuff? You stay away from that?
Oh
You
no, I ran towards the fire. I got to Manhattan in 1977 with Talking Heads, and it was all bets were off. It was Manhattan was awash in cocaine.
mm,
It's like you couldn't go anywhere. It was just, and in London, A, I couldn't afford it, and B, it wasn't that prevalent. It was kind of exclusive, but in Manhattan, especially when Talking Heads got a degree of celebrity that would open doors and club doors, and
yeah.
we got taken care of, and well, I did. I'm not speaking for them, but oh no, I went down the rabbit hole for a few years. I emerged in 1991, and I've been abstinent ever since. No drugs, no booze, no tobacco.
Good for
Uh,
you.
it's good for the planet. You should have seen me back then. It was my wife who knew me back then, although we weren't a couple, she said, "You were a nice guy, Frank, but a little scary. A little scary. I could get into that."
Yeah, well, that's did you, not to get too personal, but did you get into a whole program or you sort of take
Yeah,
it?
I got help from
Yeah,
like-minded people. It's
right,
is how I would put it. They tend to remain anonymous,
of course.
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got, but also I'd had enough. When I stopped, it had stopped working. It
Mhm.
had stopped working. I could have one beer and nearly get arrested, or I could just keep going and nonstop, and nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. So, and it was killing me. it was physically killing me.
You came to that conclusion, and
Yeah, the conclusion came to me. I didn't
okay.
come to the conclusion. And so stopping was the best thing I did. And then I had to reinvent myself as a guy, a sober guy that doesn't party. And I got back on a bus when I was 6 months sober.
Hmm.
I got my first job back in San Francisco. Actually, a band I went to see the other night, Mr. Big at the
Oh, yeah.
Fillmore the other night. They that was my first job back, and we went from the clubs to #1 as well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all over the world. But I was only ever offered drugs once on that tour. It was a New Year's Eve up in Denver, and some guy said, you want a bump?" And I said, "We don't do that," meaning the band don't do that.
Yeah.
And I used the "we" thing to, and
Yeah.
then he went away, and I've never been offered it since.
Well, that doesn't happen much anymore, which is good.
Funnily enough, yeah, yeah,
So we're going to go to a break, and we're going to do that with the music of Dougie MacLean.
yeah.
You pronounce it Dougie or Doogie?
Doogie.
I thought so. And the song is Caledonia. We'll listen to that, and we shall be back very soon.